So I ended up paying $515 for this old retro game console, but I think it's worth it. Let's find out. Okay, put the timestamp in the comments and guess what it is, and let's see how many people are right. Okay, and here we go, the grand reveal. That's right, an Xbox Mountain Dew limited edition. Now, depending on where you read online, there was either only 5,000 of these made or only 1,000 of these made. Either way, it's super rare. You hardly ever see them for sale. So I'm super excited to get this thing and see if we can figure out what's going on with it. Now, the listing said that it does not power on, so let's plug it in and see if that's true. All right, and plugged into power. What do we get? No lights. Yep, just no power. All right, let's get this thing opened up and see what's going on the inside. Oh, and somebody tore the feet off already. There's definitely marks on some of these screws. In fact, I think this one's unscrewed a little bit. The others, not so much though. Oh yeah, this one was pretty tight. I can see why they were having a problem with that one. So now we have one more screw right here, one more screw right over here. What I'm gonna do is heat up these labels just a little bit and try and peel them off. Since this is a special edition, I would like to not make holes in the labels. I would prefer if you couldn't even tell that anyone was in here, but that's not that realistic, especially with my skill level at removing labels. But let's give it a try. I'm just using my hot air soldering station to heat this up. I don't want to melt it, I just want it to be enough to really loosen this adhesive and make it peel right up. That's what I'm hoping for. Come on. Okay, that's actually working pretty well. Okay. There's that one. Start heating this other one while I get this one out. I think people will be able to tell that somebody's been in here, but I think it's still gonna look okay at least. Honestly, if it can just look decent when I get it back on, I would be pretty happy with that. Okay. Well, we didn't tear anything, and I'm not sure how it's gonna look when we're done, but I have a little bit of hope. All right, here we go. Let's see what's going on inside this thing. Okay, nothing too obvious so far, but we got to get down to the power supply and the motherboard. So let's start getting some of this other stuff off of here. Now we can look inside and see how these capacitors look. Oh man, that guy is just destroyed. That one is, that one is, that one is over there. I don't really see much on the actual power supply that looks like an issue, but that might not matter when these look so bad. Okay, let's get the disk drive out, then we can have a look at the rest of the board. These ribbon cable connectors are intense. They are in there tight. All right, really hoping this disk drive and hard drive both work. Guess we'll find out soon enough. And the bad news is this is the clock capacitor. It's definitely bulging. It's definitely leaked all over. The good news is I don't see anything that looks like it's permanently damaged, at least so far. All of these components down in here definitely have corrosion and some damage on them, but I think maybe that's all salvageable. We've got to get it out and clean everything up and take a closer look, but I think we might be okay. So I got to get this board out of here, and then also I'm going to take the power supply out as well and give that a really good inspection too. So I bought this on shopgoodwill.com. That's the place where Goodwill sends basically all of their good stuff so they can sell it online at higher prices. And it's a very similar website as like eBay. The funny thing was, after I bought it, I was researching more about this console, and I came across a post on Reddit where somebody had screenshotted this exact console that I was bidding on, and I was the high bidder at the time, and they were complaining about how people pay so much for these types of consoles, and I actually totally agree. Some of the prices people pay for broken items on sites like eBay and Shop Goodwill are actually more than you could just go on eBay and buy a used one for. Now, obviously people like me and these types of videos don't help that situation because more and more people want to buy this stuff and try and fix it. But at the same time, that's part of the reason I made this channel, is to encourage people to repair their stuff. So while on one hand, I don't like how high the prices are, on the other hand, it's great that people are putting more value on some of this old stuff and want to fix it up. Okay, and now with this board out and this board out, the fun can begin. I'm going to start by removing all of these leaking capacitors. Then we have to neutralize any of this acid, clean up any spots that need to be cleaned, do any soldering repairs that need to be done, and then we can install the new capacitors. Then we'll move on to the power supply and essentially do the same thing. So the first thing I'm going to do is remove this clock capacitor, and then we can get the board all cleaned up. I was going to remove all of these capacitors and then replace them all at once, but a lot of them are different, so I don't want to put the wrong one in the wrong place, so I'm going to do them kind of in groups. This one, and this one are all the same rating, so I can do those three at the same time. Same with some of these over here, same with some of these down here, so I'm going to replace those in groups. But first, let's get this clock capacitor removed and then the board cleaned up. There are a number of different ways that you can do that. I'm going to be using just my hot air soldering station and a pair of pliers or tweezers, and I'll just pull it out as the solder melts. And here's the bottom of that leaking clock capacitor, and its insides have just leaked all over this board. So the first thing we're going to do is come in with some vinegar. That should stop any corrosion that's happening. Then we'll clean that up with some isopropyl alcohol. I'll just dip my toothbrush in, and we'll start right over here, right under, or right on where the clock capacitor mounts, and just go through basically this whole area, anywhere that it might have leaked. And again, this is just to neutralize any of this acid that's on the board. We got some good bubbling going on down here. That tells me it's getting that acid all neutralized nicely. That's what we want. And we can't forget about the bottom side. And actually the bottom side doesn't look too bad. I am going to go ahead and just kind of give it a bit of a cleaning anyway. Then I'm going to come in with some isopropyl alcohol, and that's just going to clean that off, and then the IPA will help everything dry really nicely. Then same thing on this side. Use some isopropyl alcohol, and then let it all dry off, and then we'll do some inspections and see if there's any repairs we need to do over here. Can't quite tell yet. We might need to get under a microscope for that. And then just to dry it off even better, I'm going to use a little BW100. Nice thing about this is since it's pressurized, you can just come right in here and get in all the little crevices. All right, and with that work done, then we can get down here and see if we have any soldering work to do. And wow, this is ugly down here. Gonna scrape off some of this corrosion here. That is crazy. Look at this. Man. It is interesting that there's two different mountings here. We've got this circle right here, which would mount here, and this one over here that would mount right here. But, I mean, kind of good for us, because these holes are not in the best shape, so what we can do is just mount it right into these holes. Okay, let's just got to scrape a bunch of this corrosion off the board, and we can clean it and have a better look at what we need to do over here. And these guys over here, they have some damage too. Definitely not as much. It gets less the further you go out, but definitely have some. And then these guys over here, these all will be fine. Especially now that we've neutralized that acid. I keep saying acid. I'm not 100% sure whether those capacitors have acid in them. I think it's acid, but I could be wrong. I'm sure if you check in the comments, there will be 5,000 people correcting me if I'm wrong. Okay, I think the main issue we have is just right up in here. So I'm just gonna finish scraping away this corrosion here, and then we'll see what we need to do. It looks like we'll at least need to resolder this stuff. Hopefully we don't have to replace it all. I don't know if I have parts for it, but we'll see what it'll take to resolder. This solder is just very eaten away here. All right, we'll clean that up with a cotton bud. Yeah, it's looking better. Now we'll see if we can resolder these. And I think we're okay over here. Now I'm going to come in and flux this up, then we'll get the soldering done, and then we'll install that clock capacitor and get the other capacitors installed. This connection looks like it'll be fine. This connection looks good. It could be better, but not too bad. And then all of these connections actually look okay. I may re-solder this off camera. That could use a little more solder, a little better solder, but all right. And I did go ahead and just re-solder this leg, so that's in much better condition. And I took a closer look at this, and it's hard to tell on camera, but this trace actually goes all the way through this via. And then that kind of little silver speck down in the hole, that's actually the solder from the other side. So this actually makes a good connection there. So I think we're good here. I'm gonna get this clock capacitor installed, and then we'll start fixing all of the other capacitors. I got all of my capacitor kits from Console 5, and this is their super capacitor. That is supposed to be really good for these, so this is what I'm gonna install into this Xbox. To do this job, I'm gonna heat the solder from this side, and then just push these pins down through once the solder is melted. And then we'll let it dry, cut off the legs, and then we'll be done. We'll let it solidify, not dry. My goodness. Now I do have it installed. I can't decide. I might want to push this down a little bit more, but I don't want to push it down too much. The legs on the replacement aren't quite as wide as the legs on the one that I took out. So they do spread a little bit more there, and I don't want them to spread too much and cause any force on them. So I think I might just leave it as is, but if it annoys me, then I'll heat that back up and push this down some more. So next I'm going to replace this one and this one. Get the two biggest ones done, and then we'll move on probably to these three green ones and then these three other large ones back here. So there we go, we've got three of them replaced. Now we just got a whole bunch more to go. So now I've got this one, and this one replaced. I'm gonna use that same process to do a bunch more of these. I'm not gonna show all of that on camera, but when we get down to these surface mount capacitors, I'll show some of that. So next, I'm going to be replacing these tiny ones. And I've already gone through and marked their locations on the board. So I'm gonna use my Hakko 808 desoldering gun. And the way this works is it's actually got a little hole right in the tip. So I put the gun right over the joint that I'm trying to remove the solder out of, press the button, and it sounds like this. And that will vacuum the solder up and make it so the old capacitor will just drop right out of the hole. So I gotta flux up all of these areas where I'm going to be using that. There's, I believe, like 13 of these, so we got a lot of them. Now that we have all of those removed, we can just go through and drop in the new ones. Just like that. I'm going to bend the legs a little bit, just so it'll stay in there. And then once we have these all dropped in, we can go through and solder the legs, clip them off, and move on to the next ones. And now with all of those little tiny capacitors mounted, it is time to solder them on. And now that those are done, I'm just gonna clean up the board, and then we will do the next bigger ones, these guys, and there's only 7 of these, so that'll go much quicker than the 13 of the smaller ones. Now for these surface mount capacitors, there are multiple ways that we could remove them. I think what I'm gonna do today is just heat up one side with my iron and pull up on that side just a little bit, and then heat up the other side and pull up on that one, and just go back and forth until I can remove them. Another thing we could do is heat from the bottom side with our hot air, or even heat from the top side. I don't want to do the top side because there's too many plastic components and other things here that I don't want to get that hot. So let's give it a try from the top side with my iron. So now every electrolytic capacitor on this board has been replaced. Now it's time to do the power supply. So I'm gonna start by replacing this massive one. I'm gonna do this one on camera because this one's a cool one. I'm going to come in with some solder wick and get as much solder out of this as I can, and I think that might be enough to free it, and then we can install the new one. Alrighty then. Okay, and that worked pretty well. Now I'm gonna get the rest of these done off camera, and then we'll get this thing installed back into the console and see if we have a working Xbox after all of this work. Oh, and also if you're paying attention, I installed this backward the first time, so I had to just redo it just now. So we've replaced these capacitors, the capacitors on the power supply. These are all the old ones that we replaced. That's a lot of capacitors. This total job has taken several hours. Granted, I am filming, so it would take less time if I was not filming, but it takes a while. There's only one other thing left we need to do before we put this thing back together. We need to clean off these chips so we can apply the perfect amount of thermal paste. Now, I did heat them up with my hot air station, and that really helped me remove it. It got it off real quick. These things can be basically just glued on. This thermal paste they use feels like adhesive, but I don't think it actually is, but heating them up really helps get them off. Now it's not that big of a deal that we get it all off from down like over the sides here, but it is nice to have more of it off. It just doesn't look great. The main thing is we get it nice and clean up here because that's where the new thermal paste is gonna be. It needs a really good connection to transfer heat really well. All right, we got that one nice and clean. Now let's get this one over here clean. Now I think this thermal paste isn't quite as intense. Maybe nah, it's not quite as bad. It's still pretty bad though. I think they just used bubble gum for thermal paste back when these were made. And now all there is left to do is install the perfect amount of thermal paste. Oh yeah, look at that. So good. Now we can get it back together and test this thing out and see if all this work was worth it. And with the top cover on, we can plug it in and let's see. We can power it on. Oh no, there's no light here. Nothing happens when we press the power button. All that work and it's just not working. So here's the deal. This video is getting kind of long, but I'm not just gonna give up on this. This is too good of a console to give up on. So I'm gonna do some research. You tell me in the comments what you think is wrong, and I'm gonna make a part 2. If you like this type of video, I'm gonna put a video up on your screen now that I think you're also gonna like. So click on that, come hang out with me over there and see if I can fix the Xbox in that video. Thanks so much for watching today, and I hope you have a good one.